This conference will now be recorded.
Hello everyone, can you hear me? Hello.
Hello.
Yes. So I welcome you our online course and our course name is MRCOG Help. And as you know that we will take course for all MRCOG course like part 1, part 2 and part 3. And this is our third batch we have to start. And me and Dr. Bhavna will take class of you, and it's our free introductory session. And today I will going to discuss what is MRCOG and what's the importance of that and how you can give the MRCOG part 1. And lastly I will discuss a very short topic of physiology.
Okay,
And today
okay,
I
ma'am.
will discuss MRCOG career prospects, MRCOG overview, fact and myth regarding MRCOG, and I will give you an idea about the syllabus of part 1 and the exam schedule, and how you can book the MRCOG exam for part 1, and what are the books we recommend, and we will give you the concept of smart study, that how you can do the focus study, and why you choose us, that means what the benefits you can get from us, and these are the topics we will discuss today. So as you know that MRCOG is a very well recognized, it's an international degree, and some of you can go to UK as a specialty doctor by completion of this MRCOG, or some of you are not interested to go to UK and you want to do the job in your own country, but this MRCOG give you a good role to doing the job in a various sector of gynecology, that it can updated your knowledge and it can improve your skills by doing this MRCOG. So even you want to do the job in your own country, this MRCOG will help you in this way. And you know that nowadays MRCOG divided into three parts, that's part 1, part 2 and part 3. Part 1 and part 2 both are retained and it will occur in July and January session, and part 3 is an OSCE session and that will occur in May and November. And those who are interested to give MRCOG pattern in January, and that will occur in 18 January 2021. But if you are not completed this eligibility form, as you know that for applying for part 1, you have to do the process is in a two stage. One is eligibility and one is for booking. So before booking the MRCOG part 1 exam, you have to complete eligibility form, and this already closed. So for January session you can't give the exam if you are not completed this eligibility, but if you are interested to give in July, that is also open, you can do that. And exam booking will open very soon, it's not open right now, so it will be open very soon. And according to the countries it varies. So in the Asian country the exam fees is like 475 pounds, it will vary, and you have to check it in the RCOG website. And there's various center in RCOG. So if the most of the students are from India and Bangladesh, so there's center for that, so you can give it in your own country, this part 1 and part 2 both. And some of you are asking us frequently that how we can do this eligibility. So for eligibility completions, you have to go to the RCOG website, and if you have an account, so you can directly sign in there. But if you do not have any account in RCOG website, you have to create a new account on there, and from there you have to download and save the eligibility assessment application form. And after downloading this eligibility form, you have to complete this form and you have to submit that form in part 1 eligibility at rcog.org.uk. So in this email, you have to submit that application form, and along with these applications you have to submit your MBBS degree certificates. And it will take about 4 weeks to be processed, these eligibility applications, and when it's completed, then you can directly book the exams. That means you can book it for January or you can book it for July session. So before booking, you have to complete this eligibility form by this way. And there are so many myths related to MRCOGs. Like some thought that you have to go to London for experience, or some thought that it's only occur in London. So for giving the exams, you have to move there. But the important thing is that it's occur in various countries. Yeah, like if it is occur in your country, you can give it in your own country, and RCOG accepts all the training that you did in your country. So it's not needed that you have to shift to the London for experience. You can provide your 4 years experience from various center in your own country, and they will accept that one. So you can give it this MRCOG exam from your home country. Another thought that this is very tough, it takes a lot of attempts to pass, but it's not like that. First, you have to understand the pattern of this exam, and you have to focus on the that pattern. That means there's some short form. You need to focus on that important parts, and along with that, you have to do it in your efforts, and that will be very strategic to complete the whole syllabus. So that means that you have to make it in your own way. You have to focus on the important topics, and you have to read it frequently. You have to practice every day the questions answer by in your own self. You can make it in a group. You can discuss the question answer with your partner, and every day you have to practice this way. It's very easy to pass. And another thought that you cannot work with exam preparations, but if you do a targeted study and if you do it in a consistent efforts, you can give the exam, and there's no need to take any leave from your work. So it's very easy. That means you have to give a very focused study. That means you have to read only the important topics. Every day you have to practice that guideline by your own self. You can discuss it with your partner, and then you have to practice every day at least 20 questions by yourself, and that will help you to pass in your exam. And now we are discuss about the part 1 syllabus. And as you know that part 1 is divided into two paper 1 and paper 2, and they divided all the subject in paper 1 and paper 2. So in paper 1 it includes anatomy, biochemistry, embryology, endocrinology, epidemiology and statistics, genetics and physiology. And for paper 2 it includes biophysics. That means it includes the ultrasonography, x-ray, CT scan, MRI. These are included in biophysics, and they will give you some clinical management. For that, for answering this part, you have to read some guideline for MRCOG part 2. That is for MRCOG guideline. You have to read that one. You have to read CTG here. You have to read some guideline like some oncology guideline, endometrial hyperplasia guideline, some antenatal care management guideline like placenta previa twins, but not in details, only a small topics you have to read from there. And the very important one is CTG and labor module, that is lines guideline of labor management. And they will give you some data interpretations. You have to manage according to that, and you have to diagnose according to that. And a very small topic, that is immunology, is also in there, microbiology, pathology and pharmacology. So in paper 1 the most difficult one is statistics and epidemiology. At least 15 to 20 questions will come from this statistics, so it's very important. Some thought that we can omit this part, but if you omit statistics, that means you have to answer within 80 marks. So in 80 marks is very difficult to get 75. So you have to also read these statistics. So this part is very difficult in here. And for paper 2 the difficult one is this clinical management and data interpretations. And these are the division of the questions in paper 1 and paper 2, the vast majority of the paper 1 will come from anatomy. You can see it here. And then the next one is endocrinologies, and then physiology also include. That means the vast majority of the question will come from anatomy and endocrinology and physiology. So you have to be more focused on this part, and then you have to focus the remaining one. So that means that first, when you start to read paper 1, you have to read the anatomy part, physiology part, and endocrinology. And in the paper 2, the most important part is one is clinical management and the data interpretation, and the next one is physiology. So when you read the paper 2, you have to be more focused on clinical management, data interpretation, and pathology. That means you have to be focused which questions comes more. So that means in the paper 1, you have to read anatomy very thoroughly, and then endocrinology and physiology. And for paper 2, you have to be more focused on clinical management, data interpretation, and pathology. And among these subjects in paper 1 and paper 2, you can see the most difficult one is statistics. The next one is endocrinology, because they will give you some clinical scenario. Now the questions are more related to clinical scenario. If you see the recalls, you can easily understand the majority question will clinical oriented. So you have to be more focused on the clinical oriented questions. And the next one is the genetics, because they will give you pedigree, they will give you the one examples, and they can ask you that which one is autosomal dominant, which one is recessive. So these are quite difficult to memorize. So that's why the most difficult one endocrinology and genetics. And in the paper 2, the most difficult, I already told you, one is clinical management, data interpretation, because in here you have to read most of the guidelines of paper 2. That means in part 2, you know that there is some GTG guideline. You have to read some guideline from there, but not in details. Only a small important things you need to read from there. And another thing is that in oncology, it's not included in here, but some of the question in paper 2 also come in from oncology. So that's also very important, and that is included in your pathology part. So in paper 1, you have to give more efforts on statistics, endocrinology, and genetics. And in paper 2, you have to give more focus on, or more emphasis on, clinical management, data interpretation, and pathology, because these are very difficult. But it carries important marks, so you have to answer correctly. And as you know that due to COVID-19, now the format of part 1 and 2 change. Now it become computer-based test, and you have to give 2 computer-based papers, and each consists of 100 single-based question. Nowadays, you know that paper 1 consists of single-based question. In paper 2, it's EMQ and also SBA there. So a single-based question. Why the name is single-based? That means it's if when you read the question and all the points are just similar to that one, you have to choose the most appropriate one. So that's why the name is single based questions. Okay, and you have to answer 100 single based question for each papers. And regarding the timetable, so you know that the SBA paper 1, it's the duration is 2.5 hours, like 150 minutes, and paper 2 like the same, 2.5 hours or 150 minutes, and in between you can take a break for 1 hour. and and the total number of question is 100 SBA in each paper. So I already told you the single based answer means that when you read the question, you can see that all the questions are correct, but you have to choose the most appropriate one from there. So that's why the name is single based question. And how you can start the study? So the main thing is that you have to give a more consistent effort on your study. Every day you have to read at least 2 to 3 hours, and your study will be more focused and targeted. That means you can see that there's so many books in there, so many guidelines in there. It's very difficult for you to read all these things. So your reading should be focused and targeted. And the next thing is that you have to revise it again and again. So when you get time, you can revise the previous one so that it will help you to memorize the guideline. And you have to solve so many questions as much as you can. That means there's so many books are available. So in RCOG's website, you can get strategy questions. There's a talk. But if for you, for the part one, all the talks are not important, but related talk you can solve. There's an SBA, and you can solve the past papers. You can solve recalls. There's so many books in there. You can solve question as much as you can. That will help you to memorize the parts or memorize all the guidelines. Okay, and another thing is that some thought that whether we can read in solo or whether we can read in groups. The main benefit to read in groups are that like in your groups, that you make a schedule by yourself. You can discuss that with your partner. Like you can make a schedule with your partner, you can discuss that in your group. And your in maximum number of the group is like 5 to 6, and you can divide it the books among you, and every day you can post that question in the group. And by this way you can cover majority of the books. So if you want to read by yourself all the books, that will be very difficult for you. So what you can do, you can make a schedule for your group, and you can divide it the book among you, among of you, all of you. And every day you can post, like one day one people will post the questions, another day like one people post from another book. So by this way you can cover majority of the books. Okay, and by discussing these questions among you, that will clear up your any questions or any queries. Okay, so by this way you can study. And if you ask me that I read in group, that actually help me to pass the exams in one attempt. So I always prefer to read in group. Okay, and now the next thing is that why you choose us. So the main thing is that when you choose us, because why you choose us, because we will discuss the important topic of each module. So if you can see our study timetable, so you can see that we in for the part one we will divide it the topics according to the module. And if you can see the major important module, we will take 2 classes so that we can cover the maximum part. So the important thing is that we will discuss the topic in module wise, and we have one question answer discussion group. And every day we will post question in there, and you can answer that one, so that you can always in study you can discuss the question in there. And if you want, you can also post the question in there. Like you can make a group by yourself, you can post the question in there and you can discuss that question. And also every day we will post the questions, so that every day you can see the questions and you can memorize the topic. So by this way we will do that. And after each module we will take the exam of that module, that is also online based. As you know that now for COVID-19 your exam will be computer based. So like the same way we will take the exam, so that you have an idea about how you can give the exam within time. Okay, so after each module we will take the exam, and at the end of your course we will take 2 mock. Okay, that will be very benefited for you. Okay, and the next thing is that we will summarize all the things. We will provide you the PDF so that you can read in when you are when we read the topics, you can read our PDF also. And we will make it palatable. And it is not only just a lecture sessions. In every modules, in every topics, we will discuss question answer also in the when we were taking the class, we will also discuss the questions, so that you can also understand that way. So it's not a one-way session. Also you need to participate in that session. Okay, and we will do, already told you that we will do a subject wide test to assess your performance. And already I told you we have a very dedicated telegram group in where you can post your questions. Also we will post every day, we'll post the questions, you can answer that. And we also post the answer of that questions, correct answer on that question, so you can understand. And finally we will take the mock. There will be 2 mock for you. And as we all know that you are so busy, so it's very difficult for you to attend all the sessions in your course. So we will also provide you the recordings, and also we will provide you the PDF, so you can listen when you have time for that. Okay, so what is the basic difference from other course? What is the basic difference of MRCG Health from other course? So we will provide you the maximum number of live sessions. So if you see our timetable schedule, you can see that in major topics we will take 2 classes. Only the small one we will take only 1 classes. So we will try to cover up the maximum topics of all the modules. And it's not like a lecture. I already told you it is a very interactive session, so we will provide you the questions, also you need to answer that question. And all the modules including difficult topics like statistics are covered. That means we also cover the statistics. And we'll also provide you the notes that I already told you. We will provide you the PDF file. And after giving the exam, if you have any kind of questions related to that exam, you can post that question. We will also we'll be very happy to answer that questions. Okay, and me and Dr. Bhavna is very easily accessible. You can ask any question, anything to the group. We'll very happy to answer that one. Okay, and our main theme is that we want maximum number of pass. So we will try our best to do you to give that on. So I think that we'll be very happy if you are included in our course. So anybody have any question? Okay, so this is our contact details. If you want to join in our course, so you can contact with us. So we can move to our today's important topic, physiology. As you know that physiology is a very vast topic and it's very difficult to cover up. So today I will take only the one system, and in our next course, that means in our register course, we will take the remaining. So it's a physiology 1, and topics needs to included in physiology. These are hematology, renal system, homeostasis and fluid balance, cardiovascular system, respiratory system, GI system, reproductive system, cell physiology, and neurophysiology. And today I will discuss only the hematology part, and remaining we will discuss in our register course. Okay, so in the hematology, you know that the blood is a connective tissue that remains in a fluid form, and it constitutes about 7% of the body weight. And you know that the blood contains blood cells. It's a form elements of blood, and it also contains the liquid portion that known as plasma. So that I think you all know that blood consists of blood cells and plasma. And in the blood cell, you know that there is 3 types of cell. One is red blood cells or erythrocytes. You can see these are the red blood cells, erythrocytes. So one by one we will discuss. So first we will discuss red blood cells. In short, it's also named as an erythrocytes. And you know that these RBCs are non-nucleated form elements in the blood. So they can ask you that whether the RBC is nucleated or non-nucleated. So RBCs are non-nucleated form elements in the blood, and you know that it's a very specific form, like it's a biconcave. You can see here it's a biconcave. It's a non-nucleated disc-like structures containing hemoglobin. You know that RBC contain hemoglobin, so it's a biconcave non-nucleated disc-like structures. And you can see here the central portion are thinner and the periphery is thicker. Okay, and the half-life of these RBCs is more if you compare it the other cells. The half-life of RBC is more like 120 days. And you know that the RBCs are red in color because of presence of pigments that we call hemoglobin. That is as it's contain iron, so that's why it's red in color. And in adult human on an average has 200 gram of hemoglobin in the circulating blood. So in the circulating blood, it's contain on an average 200 gram of hemoglobin. And RBC, you know that it plays a very major role in transport of respiratory gases. That means RBC is at a very major role. As you know that the hemoglobin carries oxygen and carbon dioxide. Okay, so that's why the RBCs plays a very important roles of transport of these respiratory gases. Okay, and RBCs are larger in number compared to the other two blood cells, namely white blood cells. And that means that if they ask you that which blood cells is larger, that is RBC, and which have a very longer life, that is RBC, that is 120 days. Okay, and erythrocytes are responsible for the major part of blood viscosity. So the blood viscosity is mainly maintained by the erythrocytes. And overall, a normal RBC's diameter is 7 micron, and they become bullet shaped as they pass through the capillary, having a diameter of 5 micron. So when they pass through the capillary, it becomes squeezed and its diameter become 5 micron, but a normal RBC size is 7 micron. And I already told you the lifespan is 16 to 18 weeks or 120 days. So they can ask you in weeks or they can ask you in days. So in days it's 120 days, but in weeks it is 16 to 18 weeks. Okay, and breakdown of erythrocytes takes place in the reticuloendothelial system. You know that the reticuloendothelial systems where the RBCs are broken down, and in the RBC it's contain heme, and when it is broken down, you know that it's release hemoglobin, and when hemoglobin is broken down, it's contain heme and globin portions and also the porphyrin ring. So in the heme portion, it contain iron and also porphyrin ring. Okay, and erythrocyte breakdown also yields bilirubin that is carried by plasma protein into the liver. So the when iron is broke down, it's also release bilirubin, and that will be carried to the liver by plasma protein. Okay, so in short, this is about the RBC. The most important is it's a non-nucleated biconcave disc-like structures, and is a half-life is 120 days, and it contain hemoglobin, and its main function is to carry the respiratory gases, and overall its diameter is 7 micron, and when it passes through the capillary, it becomes squeezed and it becomes 5 micron. Okay, to measure the RBC, as you know that RBC is a very it's heavier than the other remaining cells and plasma. So when we centrifuge the blood, it can easily settle down in the test tube, in the bottom of the test tubes. So we can measure the hematocrit by this way. So hematocrit or PCV can be defined as a volume percentage of the RBC in the blood. That means by this way we can measure the hematocrit. So when we need to measure the RBCs, we can measure the hematocrit or PCV. So how we can measure the hematocrit? It is obtained by centrifugation of blood, because the red blood cells are heavier than plasma. Just a minute. Okay. So how we can measure the hematocrit? We can obtain it by centrifugation of the blood, as I told you that you can see here. So erythrocyte is heavier than the other cells and the plasma, so it can easily settle down in the bottom of the test tubes, and we can measure that one. And the appearance of the centrifuged blood could be suggested of various clinical conditions. So not only by measuring this hematocrit, also by seeing this color of that hematocrit, we can also understand some clinical conditions. Like if you see that the percentage of the RBCs are reduced, we can understand it's a condition of anemia. When you see that it's a cloudy or milky appearance, we can understand that there's a high lipid content in the plasma. If it is in yellowish appearance, we can understand it's a clinical condition that's a jaundice. If it is in red appearance, so it can give an idea of hemolysis. And if it is very greatly thick and buffy coat, like that, buffy coat means that the leukocyte and thrombocyte part, if it is very great thick, so it can give an idea about the leukemia. So by only seeing the color or appearance of the centrifuged blood, we can also understand some clinical condition. Okay, so the next one, we can measure the ESR. So it can be defined as a rate at which the RBC sediment in 1 hour. So we have to keep it for 1 hour and we have to see the rate of RBC sediment. And you know that some situation ESR can be raised or some situation ESR can be reduced. So in your question, they can give you the one clinical condition and they can ask you that in which situation ESR raised and in which situation ESR reduce. So you need to know these things, like these are the things where the ESR raises, like if it is a large cells, if everyone please mute your mic. Okay, thank you. So if it is a very large cell, so it can increase the ESR rate. Lower amount of cell can raise the ESR. More protein, inflammatory disease process such as any rheumatoid condition, SLE, polymyalgia rheumatica, malignancy. It increases with age. Roughly normal is half of the age and tend to be higher in the female. So increasing with the age, ESR raises, and also it is higher in female. So these are the factors where there is a raised ESR, but some where there is a reduced ESR, like if there is a dysfibrinogenemia, hypogammaglobulinemia, any low molecular weight dextran, if patient take that one, that can also reduce the ESR. In polycythemia vera, any kind of secondary conditions like sickle cell anemia, hereditary spherocytosis, acanthocytosis, that can reduce the ESR. Microcytosis like hemoglobin disease, iron deficiency, any hypofibrinogenemia like any DIC or massive hepatic necrosis, any excessive anticoagulation, any high WBC count, cachexia or heart failure can also reduce ESR. So you need to know just in which situation there is a raised ESR and which situation there is a reduced ESR. Okay, so the next is WBC and leukocytes. As you know that these leukocytes are colorless and this is nucleated form. As I already told you that RBC is non-nucleated, but the WBC is nucleated form elements. And you know that there's a various form of WBCs there, like the neutrophil, eosinophil, basophil, monocyte, and lymphocyte. And they can give you these lifespan, and they can ask you that how long this neutrophil is remain in the blood. So neutrophil remain for 2 to 5 days, eosinophil for 7 to 12 days, basophil for 12 to 15 days, monocyte is for 2 to 5 days, and lymphocyte is for half to 1 day. So the basophil, the half life is more, and then the eosinophil, and then neutrophil and monocyte, and lymphocyte in the last. Okay, and they can also ask you about the difference between the WBC and the RBC. The major difference is that the RBCs are red in color due to the presence of hemoglobin, but the WBCs are colorless. And the shape, it's a disc shape, biconcave RBC. WBC is irregular in shape. And the nucleus is absent in RBC, that is, it's non-nucleated, but WBCs are nucleated. Granules are absent in RBCs, but you know that in some some lymphocytes, like some leukocytes are granule or some are agranule. So that means that it's present in some type of WBC, and its RBC is only one type, but you know that there's many type of WBC. We already discussed that one, and the half life is longer in RBC, that is 120 days, and in WBC it varies, like it's from 12 hours to 15 days, but it's shorter than RBC. Okay, so these are the important difference between the RBCs and WBC. Okay, so WBC can be classified according to the presence of granules in the cytoplasm. One is granulocyte and another one is agranulocytes. Okay, so the granulocytes are neutrophil, eosinophil, and basophil. Okay, so neutrophil contain granules that can take up both acidic and basic stain. So you can see here it's neutrophil, so it can take both the acidic and basic stain. Eosinophil, it's contain the granules that only it take an acidic stain. You can see it's reddish in color, so it's take only the acidic stain. And the basophil is bluish in color, so you can see it's only take the basic stain. Okay, they can also ask you these things. So the neutrophil are both like acidic and basic stain. The granules, eosinophils granules takes only acidic stain, and the basophils granules only contain basic stains. And the agranulocytes, it can be classified into two types. That means there is no granule in the cytoplasm. One is monocytes and one is lymphocytes. Okay, so it's very important that which one is granulocytes and which one is agranulocytes. So agranulocyte is only two. One is monocyte and another one is the lymphocyte. So we will discuss one by one of these. So in the neutrophil, you know that it's the most common leukocyte in the normal blood. That means the major portion of the WBCs are the neutrophil. Okay, and it's also known as a polymorph. These WBC have a fine or small granules in the cytoplasm. So you can see here it has fine and small granule in their cytoplasm, and it comprises of 60 to 70% of circulating leukocytes. I already told you that the major portion of the WBC is the leukocytes. And you can see that it's nucleated, that nucleus is multilobed. So you can see it here. And these neutrophil are amoeboid in nature, and they contain actin and myosin microfilaments, which are responsible for its amoeboid mobility. That means neutrophil has one property that it can move by some amoeboid natures, as because it contains actin and myosin microfilaments. And the main clinical things in neutrophil is that, as you know, that in any clinical situation where there's any kind of infections, neutrophil counts increases. Okay, so it's a one important things you need to know, like when there's any kind of, due to the inflammation, you know that there's a tissue damage. So following a tissue damage, neutrophil count increases. Reduction in the neutrophil count may result in the development of throat ulcer, because neutrophil are not available to kill the bacterial invaders. So if there's any kind of throat ulcer, in that situation neutrophil count may reduce. Glucocorticoid can cause the suppression of lymphocyte and eosinophil, but not the neutrophil. So the corticosteroids can suppress the lymphocytes and eosinophil, but neutrophil count is not changed. Okay, so the main thing is that when there's an inflammation, there's a tissue damage, so rise of neutrophil in there. But in throat ulcer, neutrophil count reduce, and glucocorticoid can reduce or can suppress the production of lymphocytes and eosinophil, but not neutrophil. The next one is basophil. So you can see there's a coarse granule. You can see, if you just see the pictures just for the one time, you can easily understand and easily memorize these things. So try to see picture more. You can see that these basophil, the granules are very coarse, and it's take a purple blue stain with a methylene blue dye. You can see it's purple blue, that's why it's called a basic stain. And these basophil granules contain histamine and heparin. Okay, and the eosinophil, it comprises of 1 to 4% of the WBCs, and eosinophil have the coarse granules in the cytoplasm, you can see, which take pink or red with eosin. Okay, so eosinophils takes pink stain. Their granules are take the pink stains or red stain with the eosins, and the basophils will take purple blue with a methylene blue dye stain. And you can see in the eosinophil, the nucleus is bilobed. You can see it's here, and spectacle shapes. You can see it's spectacle shape and it's bilobed. The next one is the monocytes, and you know that the monocytes and the lymphocytes are the granulocytes. And the monocyte is originated from the stem cells in bone marrow, and its half-life is like 3 days or 72 hours. And it's the largest among the leukocyte, having a diameter varies from 14 micron to 18 micron. So that means that among the WBC, the largest one is the monocytes. Okay, and its diameter is from 14 micron to 18 microns. And I already told you there's no granules presence in the nucleosides. And you can see the nucleus is almost round, or it can be round shape, or it can be oval shape, it can be horseshoe shape, bean shape, or it can be kidney shapes. And it usually present in the center of the shell, or it can be pushed into one side. Okay, so there is one nucleus, and in the cytoplasm there is no granules. And after 4 to 6 days in the circulation, monocyte migrate out to become tissue macrophage. As you know that monocyte can be migrate into tissue macrophages, and this monocyte can transform into the large multinucleated cell in the certain chronic infections that we call giant cell. Usually we seen it in the tuberculosis and leprosy. Okay, so that means that monocyte can be easily transformed into the tissue macrophages, and in a long-standing infections like in the chronic infections, these monocyte can be transformed into the giant cells. And usually this giant type of cell we see it in tuberculosis and leprosy. The next one is lymphocytes. So it's just similar to the monocytes. Lymphocytes also do not contain the granules in the cytoplasm. You can see it here. And depending upon the size, lymphocyte can be divided into two types. One is large lymphocytes, which diameter is 10 to 12 micron, and another one is the small lymphocytes. So according to the size of the lymphocytes, we can be divided into the large lymphocytes and we can divide it into the small lymphocytes. So the larger one is 10 to 12 micron and the smaller one is 7 to 10 micron. Okay, and but depending upon the function of the lymphocytes, we can divide it into two types. One is the T lymphocytes and another one is the B lymphocytes. Okay, so the T lymphocytes mainly concerned with the cellular immunity, and the B lymphocytes is concerned with the humoral immunity by production of immunoglobulin. Okay, so we will discuss in details in your immunology topic. Just you need to know in here, like the lymphocytes, according to the functions, we can divide it into the T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. And the T lymphocytes are responsible for the cellular immunity, and B lymphocytes are responsible for the humoral immunity, and they will produce immunoglobulin in there. And after birth, some lymphocytes are formed in the bone marrow, but the most are formed in the lymph nodes, thymus, spleen, from precursor cell that originally came from the bone marrow. That means usually at after birth it's originated from bone marrow, but the major part of the lymphocytes are formed from lymph nodes, thymus, and also spleen. Okay, so this is in short about the WBC types, and here you need to know that which one is nucleated, which one is non-nucleated, that is RBC and WBC, and which contain granules and which do not contain granules, and which takes acidic stain, which contain mixed stain, that is neutrophil, and which contain basic stain, the lifespan of the different types of WBC, and also the percentage of that different type of WBC in blood. Okay, so the last is the platelets. So you know that the platelets is a very important part of blood coagulations, and it's small, colorless. It's also non-nucleated. So among the three types of blood cells, only the WBC is nucleated. Platelet and RBCs are non-nucleated, and it's moderately refractive bodies, and our membrane is encapsulated fragments of megakaryocytes. Okay, that means its membrane is encapsulated, and they are more numerous than WBC by the factor of 20 or more. That means it's the number of platelet is more than WBC, and it contains two types of granules. One is alpha granules and another one is dense granule. And the lifespan of this platelets is 9 to 10 days, and the normal platelet count it varies, that is from 2 lakh to 4 lakh per cubic millimeter. Okay, and these are the granules containing substance, like in the alpha granules it's contain the clotting factor. So the clotting factors in the platelet it present in the alpha granules. You can see here that the fibrinogen factor 5, factor 13, platelet derived growth factor, vascular endothelial growth factor, basic fibroblast growth factor, endostatin, and thrombospondin. So you can see that the clotting factor mostly present in alpha granule. And the dense granule contains nucleotides, serotonin, phospholipid, calcium, and the lysozyme. That means calcium, phospholipid, serotonin, these are present in the dense granule. And in the alpha granule, it contained clotting factors. Okay, and in this hematology, the another important things you need to read, that is coagulation pathway. So you know that there is two types of coagulation pathway. One is intrinsic pathway, another one is the extrinsic pathway. It's very easy. You need not to read in details of that. So first, before going to discuss about the different types of pathway, you need to know the definitions of coagulation. or clotting. So it is the process in which the blood changes its form from liquid to a gel, resulting in the formation of clot. That means when a blood changes its form to liquid to gel, and ultimately it form a clot that is near about the solid form. So this process we call blood coagulation and clotting. Okay, and there's only three important steps will occur. So one first steps is formation or activation of prothrombin activator. Second one is the conversion of prothrombin into thrombin, and the last one is the conversion of fibrinogen into fibrin. So these are the main three steps of coagulation pathway you need to remember. So first is formation or activation of prothrombin activator. Second one is the conversion of prothrombin into thrombin. Third one is the conversion of fibrinogen into fibrin. Okay, so if you see the pictures, you can understand. So this is intrinsic pathway and this is extrinsic pathway. So the first I told you that first is the formation of prothrombin activator. Second is, you can see, second is the conversion of prothrombin into thrombin, and the last the conversion of fibrinogen into fibrin. So you can see the conversion of the fibrinogen in the fibrin is the third steps. I again repeat, by this intensive pathway and the extensive pathway, there is in three steps. The first you have in the coagulation pathway, the first step is to formation of prothrombin activator. Second step is the conversion of prothrombin to thrombin, and the third step is the conversion of fibrinogen to fibrin. Okay, so what's the important or basic difference you need to remember in intrinsic and extrinsic pathway? So in the intrinsic pathway, if you can see here, when there is any kind of endothelial damage, so in the endothelium, you know that there is an also collagen. So collagen is exposed, and so that will ultimately activate a series of coagulation pathway to that ultimately form the prothrombin activator. So that means intrinsic pathway will only active when there is any kind of endothelial damage. So you need to remember just these things. And in the extrinsic pathway, when there is any kind of tissue trauma, so from tissue trauma, there is a release of tissue thromboplastin, and that ultimately active a series of pathway, and that lastly form prothrombin activator. Okay, so if any kind of endothelial damage, intrinsic pathway will active. If any kind of tissue trauma, tissue thromboplastin will release, and that will cause extrinsic pathway and ultimately form the prothrombin activator. And these prothrombin activator then convert the prothrombin into thrombin, and this thrombin then helps to conversion of fibrinogen to fibrin. Okay, so this is the three steps of coagulation pathway you need to remember, not in details. Okay, so the next things you need to read from here, one is the bleeding time, one is the coagulation time, one is PT, APTT, these things. So what is bleeding time? Okay, so bleeding from a small cut in the skin is normally diminished by local vascular spasm due to the effect of tissue damage and serotonin on the vascular smooth muscles. Okay, so if there's any kind of cut in the skin, you know that automatically it will stop that bleeding only by local vasospasms, and then also release of serotonin on the vascular smooth muscle, that also causes vasospasm, and that ultimately stop the bleeding. Okay, and usually it will take about 5 minutes, not more than that. Okay, and this duration, that means the stoppage of that bleeding, this duration is we call bleeding time. So bleeding from a small cut in the skin is greater from warm skin than from the cold skin, because warm dilate the blood vessel in the. So if the skin is warm enough, in that case bleeding will be more. If it's in case of colder, that means you know that in the winter bleeding can easily stop, but in the hot weather bleeding will be more profuse, and bleeding time will be prolonged in that case, because that will, it helps to dilate the blood vessels in the skin. Okay, and bleeding is reduced if the affected limb is elevated, because intravascular pressure is reduced in an affected limb. So if any cut in any kind of limb, if we elevate that limb, that will reduce the intravascular pressure, and that will ultimately helps to stop the bleeding. Okay, So bleeding time, that is within 3 to 5 minutes, but not more than that. So you know that one clinical situations where the bleeding time will be prolonged, so that is hemophilia. In the hemophilia, you know that there is an deficiency of factor 8 and factor 9. In hemophilia A, there is a deficiency of factor 8, and hemophilia B, there is a deficiency of factor 9, and that will causes prolonged bleeding time. Okay, so the bleeding time is the time interval in the beginning of oozing of the blood after a cut or injury till arrest the bleeding. So this time we call bleeding time. I already told you the normal durations of bleeding time is 3 to 6 minutes, and that can be determined by platelet and vascular spasm or vascular contractions. So if any kind of, that means if any kind of platelet deficiency or any kind of capillary deformity, in that case there will also, that will cause the prolonged bleeding. In the prolonged bleeding, that will cause purpura. And if the platelet count is below 20,000, you know that there will be serious bleeding. And spontaneous bleeding from gum seen in the vitamin C deficiency is due to capillary abnormality, not a clotting defect. So due to is in the scurvy, so where there is a vitamin C deficiency, that will there you know that there's also spontaneous gum bleeding will occur, and it is mostly due to capillary abnormality, not a clotting defect. Okay, so the bleeding time, that will be depends upon the platelet and vascular contraction, and on an average bleeding time is 3 to 6 minutes. Next is the clotting time. Clotting time is the interval of oozing of the blood after a cut or injury till the formation of clot. Okay, so that means that bleeding time is that till the arrest of bleeding, we call it bleeding time, and till the formation of clot, that we call the clotting time. Okay, so the normal duration is 3 to 8 minutes, and it will be prolonged in hemophilia. So in the hemophilia, clotting time will be prolonged, and in the thrombocytopenia or any kind of vascular or any kind of capillary abnormality, bleeding time will be prolonged. Okay, so in the prothrombin time, PT measures like clotting time from the activation of factor 7 through the formation of fibrin clot. So this is the time taken by the blood to clot after addition of tissue thromboplastin to act. That means it will time measures the clotting time, that is from activation of factor 7 to formation of fibrin clot. Okay, and it is this test actually measured the integrity of extrinsic and common pathway of coagulation. So if you can see the chart again, so that means that this prothrombin time will start from these factor 7, activation of factor 7 to formation of this fibrin clot. So this whole period is called prothrombin time, and that ultimately actually indicate the extrinsic pathway. So by this measuring this prothrombin time, we can easily understand about the defect in any kind of extrinsic pathway. Okay, so that means that activation of factor 7 to formation of fibrin clot. So this duration we can calculate is as an prothrombin time. Okay, and by measuring the prothrombin time, we can assess the extrinsic pathway. And it can be prolonged in some situations when there is a deficiency of factor 7, factor 10, factor 5, and factor 2. And the normal prothrombin time is 16 to 18 seconds. And you know that in some situations where prothrombin time will be prolonged, like if the patient is taking any kind of anticoagulant therapy like warfarin or any unfractionated heparin, not the low molecular weight heparin, DIC, and liver disease. And these situations where there will be prolonged prothrombin time. The coumarin and the warfarin interferes with the vitamin K metabolism, and which inhibit the G-carboxylation of factor 8, 7, 9, 10, and thus prolongs the prothrombin time. So how this warfarin prolong the prothrombin time? Because it will interfere the vitamin K metabolism, and that will ultimately inhibit the activations of factor 2, 7, 9, and 10, and that ultimately prolong the prothrombin time. And vitamin K restored a normal prothrombin time, and it's used therapeutically if PT is prolonged or INR ratio, that is international normalized ratio, is very high. That means when there is an INR prolonged or PT prolonged, we can give therapeutically vitamin K to correct that one. Okay, so the PT can indicate extrinsic pathway. It can be prolonged in case of warfarin therapy, in case of unfractionated heparin therapy, in case of DIC, or in case of liver disease. And APTT, it is time is taken for the blood to clot following the addition of an activator such as phospholipid along with the calcium of it. And this is all called activated partial thrombothrombin time. And this APTT measures the integrity of intrinsic and common pathway of the coagulation pathway. That means by measuring this APTT, we can also assess the intrinsic pathway. And the normal durations of this APTT is 30 to 40 seconds. And this APTT also can be prolonged in anticoagulation therapy, as well as the deficiency or inhibition of factor 2, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, and also in 12. That means if it's a time taken for the blood clot from the addition of activators such as phospholipid along with the calcium to it. So if you can see the charts again. So that means you can see here, this is the pathway when this phospholipid that is released from the platelet when it is interacted with the calcium and ultimately form the prothrombin activator. So this time limit is called the APTT. So it's indicate the intrinsic pathway, and it is also prolonged in anticoagulation therapy, as I told you, and deficiency of some factors like 2, 8, 9, 10, 2, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, and the normal duration of APTT is 30 to 45 seconds and PT is 16 to 18 seconds. So as a treatment purpose, please remember in the PT we can use vitamin K. So anybody have any questions in hematology? And this is in short about the hematology part of the physiology. Dr. Sana, you can unmute your mic.
Yes, factor 5 deficiency.
Can you please read the question first?
Which of the following prolongs prothrombin time? Option A is factor 5, B von Willebrand, C hemophilia, D aspirin therapy, E protein C deficiency. I think factor 5 deficiency, the answer.
Yes, you are right. Okay, that means that these are the situations where there is a prolonged PT, that is factor 5 deficiency, warfarin therapy, hepatic failure or cirrhosis, and DIC.
Okay.
Okay, Dr. Sajia?
Thrombotic agent.
Dr. Sajia, you can unmute your mic. Dr. Harsha? Dr. Harsha, are you there? Or Dr. Neha? Anyone can answer the questions? Like Dr. Nimi?
Which of the following is a prothrombotic agent? Protein
Yes.
C, protein S, antithrombin 3, thromboplastin, plasmin. Antithrombin 3.
Prothrombotic
The
agent.
question is which one is the prothrombotic agent? What do you think? Which one is the prothrombotic agent?
Which of the following is a
That means which
prothrombotic?
helps in coagulation. Which helps in coagulation.
Antithrombin 3.
Thromboplastin. D.
Yes, thromboplastin. As because only the thromboplastin is the prothrombotic agents, other all are antithrombotic agents like protein C, ACE, antithrombin 3, and plasmins. All are the antithrombotic agents. You know that the plasmin helps in breakdown of fibrin clot. So plasmin is also antithrombotic agents. Protein C, ACE also helps in preventing coagulation. Antithrombin 3 is also coagulation. Okay. So
Okay.
anybody have any question?
Will the notes be available? It will be recorded.
Yes, it will be available. We will also post that this recording, so you can also listen this.
Okay.
When you are free, you can also listen this recording.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
So
Thank
thank you. Okay. Bye.